In today's video, I'll be going over 4 red flags in a passport that you should be aware of if you want to diversify your personal portfolio. Starting off with the first one on this list, I've talked about this numerous times and it's a very obvious one to talk about. That would be if a country doesn't allow dual citizenship, because for me, dual citizenship is absolutely monumental. Every country, in my opinion, should allow dual nationality as a basic human right. So, if I'm looking at a country and I find that it doesn't allow dual nationality, alright, that's a major red flag towards this passport. I'm not going to have an incentive to move to that country because I want to maintain as many passports as I can. And if any country is going to think that they can come up to me and say, hey, alright, you're going to naturalise in our country, give up your other passports, I'm not doing that. Another one would be that if a country has some form of mandatory military service, because I don't look at that for me, I look at that for my future children, because if I naturalise later on in life, I might be exempt from it, fine. But I don't want to ever put my kids in a position where, alright, I gave them another passport, but in order for them to receive that passport, they have to have served in that country's military, which in my eyes is always going to be a foreign military. So I'm really not a fan of conscription-based passports. And unless you are keen on serving in that country's army, I think I would personally probably avoid all passports that have some form of conscription, like the plague. I'm not a fan of that system. And for me, it's much more important for personal freedom. Once again, I feel like any time a country tells you have to do something, that is a violation of your personal freedom. So that is another thing that I find to be a major red flag. Moving on to the third one, that would be the country and the passport's reputation. Because for me, although I don't think every passport should be that strong, and I'm not always going to be looking for that strong passport, sure, I might take a weaker passport if it's in a better country. But if the passport is super weak and it's not liked by anyone and the country has a lot of beef with people and it might get you on an international sanction list if you naturalise in that country, there's just no point in getting that passport unless you are absolutely monumentally sure that you want to live in that country for the rest of your life. Because, let's say you travel on a very strong Western passport, right? You enter a country, but they also see that you have naturalised in a enemy country, a very strongly sanctioned country. Chances are they're going to start asking the questions, all right, who is this guy? And also, I don't want that, and I'm also not keen on living in any sanctioned country, because although that sanctioned country might not do anything to me, the sanctions will impact my personal freedom a lot. And another one, this doesn't really go into the passport itself, but more so the country itself. One thing that I was really surprised by when I travelled across Europe is that there are some countries out there with horrendously bad reputations that are amazing, but there are also some countries that have good reputations that are horrendous. Because, a lot of people that talk about pro-European Union citizenship like me, a lot of people like to say that, okay, every EU passport is good. However, I have to disagree. I've talked about this monumentally about EU countries like Estonia that don't allow dual nationality. To me, that's not a good passport to begin with. But also, there are some countries out there that might have a respectable passport, like an Estonian passport, fine. They might have a very strong passport, a European passport, a European country in the West. However, having been to some of these countries, I will have to say that Western Europe is a lot more dangerous than Eastern Europe. Because in my experience, there is a Western European country that has an amazing reputation among people. And yes, some of their cities are nice, but most of their cities nowadays are absolute dumps. And for me, as someone who intends to get citizenship the right way, perhaps through residence, since I have no descent in those countries, I'm going to have to do the residence. And why on earth would I want to live in a country that's a dump in order to get a passport? To me, what I always find monumental is don't just look at the passport, also look at the country. What is the country like? Do you feel safe in that country? Do you feel accepted into that country? Because if you're always going to be walking around feeling like an absolute foreigner and someone who doesn't belong there completely, then it might be a little bit more difficult to blend in. And also, if you don't feel safe there, there's absolutely no point in you living there for 5 to 10 years just to get a passport. Go to another country where perhaps the residency requirements are the same, maybe they're a little bit less, but a country that's going to treat you better in regards to safety. Another one to finish off this video, that would be if a country has too many regulations. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about taxes like a lot of citizenship people do. However, I still do find that that is absolutely monumental to talk about. But for me, I'm going to twist this a little and subvert it and talk about regulations among your personal life in other ways apart from tax. For example, there is one major Western European country that I'm absolutely fond of. I think it's a really good country. I think their capital city is amazing and I would love to live there. However, that country simply has far too many regulations for me. For example, here are some regulations that I'm not a fan of. You cannot homeschool your kids without getting horrendously fined. It's actually illegal to homeschool your kid. You cannot name your kid anything you want. You cannot name your kid something creative. You have to get a name pre-approved by the government. That's just asinine. And they just have a load of regulations, have a load of documents, and in my opinion, they really do try and make up stuff to make you do. And although I'm fine with regulations, I don't think it should just be willy-nilly. But, you know, when they take it to that much of an extreme and they just do it for the sake of it, and they implement all these rules like you can't homeschool your kids, and they tell you what you can and you can't do with your own kids, to me that's a major red flag, and I'm probably going to avoid that country, because although I don't think that country should necessarily change their laws, that's that country, they can make whatever laws they want. I'm just not going to live there. Let me know what red flags you have thought about while watching this video. Be sure to comment them down in the comments below.